Hey everybody, today we talking about Texas, privatization, and a whole lot of other stuff on the South Star Classroom.
Audio Jungle.
Welcome back to another episode of the South Star Classroom. That's Omar, that's David, and that's Jubilee, fresh from the motherland, back from the continent.
Woo!
How's everybody doing today?
All right.
Omar, I'm gonna come to you
Excellent.
last because so we can hand it off to you. But we got to start with Jubilee, the world traveler. It's usually Omar in some random mountain somewhere in some random continent, whatever. So today you have been the world traveler. Where did you go, if you want to share, and how was it?
Cape Town and Johannesburg, South Africa. We went to Stellenbosch, the wine country. I mean, it's the circle of life, and it moves us all. I saw Mufasa at the safari. I told him he should get. I said, "Listen, Mufasa, you can get a little therapy. We know you've been through a lot. You don't got to carry all that anger. You know what I mean?" He just kept walking. No, well, you gotta watch the part two. You gotta watch the part two. He never dies. You didn't see Lion King on Broadway? Which version are you watching? Just killing dreams.
Mufasa died. You and these animals. These animals is dead.
Listen, Mufasa lives in all of us. You didn't watch the rest of the show.
He's like a Jedi spirit
on Broadway. But it was phenomenal, and I think that's still an understatement. We had great tours, but we also had a real dose of reality. Like, they've got load shedding going on. So we were sitting at dinner and all the electricity goes on. So we found out the poorest in the country also deal with those kinds of challenges for 10 hours a day, not having electricity and still figuring out how to power through the day. And then we had all the luxury. So we, it ran the gamut, learned a lot. Went to see, Mandela's cell and listen to political prisoners' stories and all of that. And my life is forever changed. Next stop, Ghana is my goal.
That's what's up. One of my homies went there for the year return. Omar and David, y'all familiar with the year return? It's a good cultural moment.
What is that?
It's a good cultural moment for people listening. So I'm sure Jubilee's probably familiar. The year return was where Ghana was trying to welcome back all the black people that had been, shipped out or taken away for slavery. They was offering things like dual citizenship and when you go, they had these tours and slave castles and things like that. So my homeboy went and said it was a pretty emotional experience for him. But yeah, amazing. So Ghana's bringing a lot of black Americans out there and trying to welcome them. David, how you been, man? Talk to us, brother.
I've been good. It's glad to have the whole gang back together. We're not a criminal gang. We're a podcast gang. So good to have you back, Jubilee.
Thanks for that clarification.
Yeah.
Gang.
And let's see, gang. And let's see, this week on Tuesday, I had the pleasure of starring in a reality show, which is called, you may have seen it, Chaperoning Your Middle School Child's Field Trip to the Zoo. And it was, in all seriousness, it was his first field trip in a while. They didn't do any last year. And actually they did one last year, but this is the second one. And again, my son is in a big school. It's like 1,500 kids, and they're not taking all the seventh graders. So what they do is within the seventh grade, and some, most of you are familiar with this, they have like a kind of a housing structure where they have smaller units within a full grade, a team structure. And so his team was part of the group that got to go to the zoo, and I chaperoned. I had a group of kids, he and some of his friends, And, you know, some of the kids had told me that it was two of the kids in our group said that this was their first field trip since they were like in the third grade. If you think about COVID and the disruption and everything. So, you know, it was like that hit differently. Definitely. The kids were, I mean, they were just reflecting on it. And I was like, oh my goodness. Well, I'm glad that we're here today on the bus and that we're going to have some fun and see some really interesting things today. And it was very well organized. You know, I gave kudos to the staff. I got to talk with my kids' teachers. They're great. We had good conversations. And so, you know, kudos to the educators out there that are doing these things, like getting kids off campus just to kind of explore different parts of the world. It's really good for community building, for schools, school communities. And, you know, it's good to get kids out. Some kids had, you know, like I said, they hadn't been on a field trip since the third grade. That's 4 years ago. Right. And so just kind of like hopefully the spark of return to normalcy. We'll see.
That's what's up, man. Omar, I'll go and then we'll throw it to you for your intro and then you can actually just take over. Cool. It has been a very busy last few days. Traveling. I was back home in Oakland. A lot of people didn't know because when people know, it's you can never be in a bunch of you can't never make it to everybody well enough. But had an event in partnership with Families in Action and Energy Converters just around these A through G Achievement Awards, and it was pretty interesting. And I'm working on 2 different reports right now. That one has been this HBCU report, and just living in that data and living in like that history, and looking at these schools that are led by HBCU leaders, and just the subtle differences and how these and connections that these K-12 kids are getting. That's connected to like this larger HBCU history is really interesting. It's fascinating. But there's another one that we're writing right now, the Oakland report, and the young people this year decided to do accountability, and they looked at it from systemic, like structural systemic accountability, educator accountability, and then what we call end user accountability, like students and their parents and community. And it was just really interesting peeling back this onion of like education, where everybody has a role to play. Like everybody has something that to kind of be called to the carpet to if we want to get better. And just proud of those young people. And Marquise, he's the lead on my staff. He's been on this show before, I think. But when it's done, we'll probably have him on to talk about it. It's just really interesting. Like these young people have been very just honest about what they've seen and holding themselves accountable, and their educators. Like when young people are saying, I can tell my teacher isn't prepared, or I can tell that like I've had more than 2 teachers fired in the year multiple times. And like, I am aware that this stuff is happening. You know, it's almost like when you watch one of those things on TV and like parents are arguing and then it goes to like kids listening to the argument. So it's always an interesting dynamic as we talk about education. But I'm tired. But I will be going back to writing right after this. So it's going to be fun. But I'm really happy to be back here with you all. And I'm looking forward to today's conversation because Omar it all comes out that we all have these political science type backgrounds, like when Omar has this joint. So, you know, he's very passionate, man. But I'm ready to hear from Omar, man. Tell us what's going on, where in the world you are. And then after you do your check-in, bro, introduce this topic. Like, don't none of us know what it is.
It's like Carmen Sandiego, man. Like, no one knows where I'm at in the world.
I know you're just in a white room. I'm like, are you being interrogated? Like, what are we doing?
That's exactly right, man. Look, I'm going to have a lamp on me in a second. Muggsy's going to come in and be like, I saw you out there. See, I saw you with her. See, you're going to be swimming with the fishes. See? Unfortunately, I have not been in Cape Town and, what's the word? Johannesburg. I'm dying to go. South Africa is like top 5 on the list right now. I'd love to go see Kenya. I'm dying to see that area of the world. So much love to Jubilee, who's out there. I want to hear a more detailed account soon. I'm in El Paso. Things for me are really great this week. Again, a lot of personal growth. Scheduled to do a lot of book writing next week, which I'm really excited to jump back into because, ladies and gentlemen, the South Star Classroom is, in fact, writing a book that may actually become an accredited course in terms of professional development for teachers and really administrations and district leaders. Before I start talking about what's going on here, I want to give a huge shout out to our South Star Classroom coming back. Got all 4 members, and a huge heads up To everyone that's listening, ladies and gentlemen, we are making a monumental shift in our day and our time. And I believe we're starting next week. So we are going to shift to Tuesdays, same bat time, same bat channel. So that will be 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Pacific, but no longer on Fridays, on Tuesdays, because we figured, ladies and gentlemen, Fridays, you're out of town, you want to end the week, you're trying to get your happy hour on, and we figured, hey, what better time to talk about the things that we're discussing than a Tuesday? Look out for that.
We'll run the re-air on at the same time. So we'll do it live on Tuesday, and then you'll be able to catch the re-air on Friday at the regular time.
Indeed. And then eventually this summer, we'll figure out how to take all our good stuff, put it on podcast format so that you can not only watch us, but you can hear us in your car as you're doing things. Before I jump into the topic really quick, El Paso, man, I don't know if you've seen it. It's on national news right now. The immigration scenario is so massive, so massive. We have not only thousands, tens of thousands of immigrants here in El Paso seeking refuge from what are essentially like poverty-stricken, war-torn countries in Central America, hoping for a better life somewhere. So you may have seen,
and the Caribbean.
Indeed, yes, very much so. Thank you for bringing that up. You may have seen our girl, Doc. You were on the show with her back in the day, or maybe it was just me and Antonio and Andrew, but on an episode of, I think, of our old show, well before South Star Classroom. Estás en el Puro, Wyoming. We had Cassandra Hernandez, city council member. She was on CNN talking about the massive immigration that's happening here. Our mayor, Oscar Leeser, also a friend, was talking about that, and the fact that like there's discussions of taking them up to Michigan and New York and Chicago, simply because there are family members that they have up there, and this is where they want to go. And ultimately, the huge debate about these sanctuary cities and whether El Paso has the resources or not. But I want at least our audience members to know that I just want you to put yourself in a position right now thinking about these folks from Central America, from the Caribbean. They are, in terms of poverty, the lowest level of poverty you could possibly imagine. These people are not driving mopeds or driving cars or taking buses to get up to Mexico, to get up to the United States. They are walking. I want you to think very carefully about families. How terrible must it be in these areas of Central America and the Caribbean that these families are not only risking their own lives, but their children's lives, saying to themselves, we have to go through these countries filled with drug lords, with ne'er-do-wells, which is a fancy way of saying, essentially people that do not have the best of intentions, criminals, coyotes, drug dealers, whomever it may be, on the road to get to America. They've got to circumvent all of those things, not to mention just the geography. How terrible must it be where they're at and the circumstances that they're willing to risk their lives in order to seek a better life for themselves and their kids? This is a huge reason we're seeing such a large scale jump in the migration patterns that we've seen recently, is that the situation down there is horrible, which, by the way, as a guy who loves history and minored in history, sadly, like, the United States was completely complicit and participatory in the disastrous situations in Central America. So El Paso is going nuts. If you haven't looked it up, take your time to look it up. But we're going to get into our topic because we're already 15 minutes in. And ladies and gentlemen, I'm excited to bring this up. This is very much locally based in Texas. Texas Monthly, amazing magazine, extraordinarily reputable, wrote an incredible article, which I'm hoping that we'll post for our listeners here so that they can take a listen to it. Post an article really talking about the privatization of education, and is Texas ground zero for the privatization of education. So what's the article talk about? What's it saying? The long story short is that there's a few billionaires in the state of Texas who have started, what is labeled as a far right group and a far right PAC to essentially start paying for the campaigns of not just Texas legislatures at the Texas state legislative level, but at the school board level, with the expressed intent of getting folks who agree with their agenda into not only the state legislature, but local school boards with a very, very, very specific agenda of training these folks up on the agenda of essentially book banning, dismantling, any kind of critical race theory discussion, which again isn't even happening in our schools, toppling the entire trans situation, but more importantly, really trying to interject religion into schools and really trying to interject the ability for the state to move into the voucher system and essentially privatize, in their words, the education in the state of Texas, hoping that this momentum in Texas not only catches on here, but oftentimes as Texas, California, and New York go, the country goes, in a better effort of creating a system that then will be replicated in places like Oklahoma, Indiana, Idaho, Colorado, so on and so forth. So the article's deep, y'all. It's deep. And it's basically getting at the point of, are these folks essentially buying legislatures and school board members in order to create very specific far right-wing policy that will eventually privatize education? That's the big question. Is Texas trying to privatize education in the country? So I know that Jubilee, David, and Charles have read the article. I'm sure they've got their opinions on it, as I do. And the article goes into a specific case study about what's going on in Dripping Springs, which is a small, beautiful community outside of Austin, the challenges that the specific board member is facing, death threats that this board member is facing, the level of tumult that's going on in a local school board that's never existed before. Jubilee, Doc, David, what were your initial takes on the article? What were your initial impressions?
I actually didn't read it. I'm every man today. So, so that's what we try to do for now that, people want insider baseball. I try to have at least one of us not read it, right, or not read the thing. So it forces us to kind of give you the details so we can have that larger conversation. But I'm interested in based off of what you said. And it sounds like, there are some major things happening in places like Texas and Florida but that's the top line that I got as just like a listener, right? It's like, what is going on? Are we worried about places like Texas and the big stick that they have and a large conservative like movement there impacting the rest of the country, or the same way that California may do it or New York may do it on a liberal side, right? I don't know. I think for me, just I'll be quick and get out the way because I don't have all the details. Is I think that places like that are very strong in doing what it is that they want to do, the same way New York and California want to do what they want to do. And one of those things is Texas is part of a Bible belt. They believe in certain things, that they are famously conservative, and they are people that this is a place that leans heavily on states' rights, and being able to do what they want to do in Texas. I think it's going to be really interesting. And I'm interested if you're a liberal or left-leaning person or a Democrat in Texas, this could be like a pretty nightmarious situation. I don't know if nightmarious is a word, but it is today. It sounded good. So I'm gonna get out the way and let you all answer. I'm going right there. I'm gonna write an article called "Nightmare" with nightmarious in it.
I love it, man.
Jubilee, you want to go?
I don't have much to add yet. I'm cackling at what Charles just said because that's hilarious. And I have questions at this point, and I'm always just thinking about the core, like, what is this all for? I know Bible Belt, conservative, all that, but like long term, what do these people want? Like, what do you want? And like, what about the children? Like, how much of this is about the children? And I know if maybe I pose that question to those that are seeking to move in this direction, they'll say, we want to preserve morals and values, and like, I get that. But is this the best way to do that? And like, I just feel like there's some other things that need to be unearthed in terms of intention. So I am still in a space of question mark, and I don't want to add anything else to Charles's nightmarious list. So I'm gonna pass the ball to you, David.
All right, thank you. Yeah, I skimmed over the piece. It is quite long, but it's good. It's a very thorough kind of description of what's happening in a couple of key regions around a couple of key school board races. But bigger picture, like we're talking about Texas. This is happening in many states across the country right now. It's a very interesting scenario because before COVID, there was very little interest in school board. People didn't even know about school boards, and I think as a result of people paying attention more to education and who makes decisions as a result of COVID and the school shutdowns, and the associated culture wars. This is like the perfect storm for what's happening, at least in this case and others too, where you have very motivated groups, obviously with local people, but there's a national network that has created a template, and it's kind of unfolding in different regions across the country. And I don't think it's about public education, which is, is being a school board member, you don't really get paid. It's hard work. It's political work. I think if you're going to become a school board member, like you want to be in a mindset of like, let's build. But a lot of these people, unfortunately, are coming into this political arena with the dream of like destroying or destruction or tearing down. And that's just not a good place to be. It's not good for communities, and it's definitely not good for kids.
Right on. Well, I think from an objective standpoint, this is what the article points to. In my editorial job, I want to paint a little controversy and kind of put you all on the spot a little bit. On this very show, we've basically courted the idea for vouchers. And the folks who are running this, so in the article, it talks about an organization called the Texas Public Policy Foundation. And this is a far right-wing political foundation that's funded by far right-wing PACs. The folks behind this are billionaires Tim Dunn and Ferris and Dan Wilkes.
And a PAC is a...
Thank you. A political... Oh, thanks,
Yep.
man. That's a very insider ball. I appreciate you bringing that up. Political Action Committee. So long story short for our audience, when the Supreme Court basically said that corporations could have a voice and they can interject as much money as they can into political elections, it led to the vast increase in what's called the Political Action Committee, which is essentially a corporation or a fund that can supply endless amounts of money to any political candidate with a very specific political ideology. Now, what's going on is that PACs on the far right side, political action committees, are funding the candidacies of far right candidates. Now, the question is, why in the hell are these billionaires spending so much time funding school board elections and the Texas legislature, state legislature? You're thinking like, why aren't they funding presidential elections or Congress? Because really from the far right, their strategy is go local. This is how we're going to win. We're going to win by going local, and the indoctrination at the school level, at the education level, and at the state level of our ideologies. What are our ideologies? We're going to ban these books. So they banned Toni Morrison's The Bluest Eye. How Jubilee wasn't smoking pissed about that. I mean, I've read almost every Toni Morrison book that there is. Beloved was always my favorite, and they're banning them left and right, basically saying our kids can't learn this shit. They're straight up going for, let's get the 10 Commandments in every single classroom. That's how far.
That's crazy.
Ideologies go. The fucking 10 Commandments, dude. Are you serious right now? Like Moses coming down from the mountaintop and being like, I need to teach you all how to learn things because we lost God in our classroom. forget about what they're talking about with like the entire trans situation, where not only is it just strictly banned, but like a high level heterogeneous ideology of anything that is gay, queer, lesbian, bi, trans is against God's will. To be taught in our classrooms that it's against God's will. This is the things that they're funding. They're using this whole like, hey man, education sucks after the pandemic. I don't think anything really changed, which we can get into later in the show, to basically push forward and say, see, schools aren't working. We should privatize them. And in order to, in privatization of schools with vouchers, we can interject whatever values that we want, including all of these religious values. And they said education, quote, is ground zero. We're focusing in on education. We're focusing in on school boards. What the article is really getting at is this woman who joined the school board in the old school way of like, I'm just a parent. I care about the local community. I want to participate in the school board, is now dealing with political action committees, far right-wing candidates, tumultuous elections, and an onslaught of people coming into school board meetings and basically going at the throat of these school board members, basically saying, how come we're not teaching God in the classroom? How come we're teaching this critical race theory in the classroom? We need to ban the bluest eye. So really what the article is getting at is, has education become so damn political that we as educators can't even educate anymore, because school boards are being bought and sold by far right-wing billionaires now implementing policies that have very little to do with education and more about the indoctrination of our children in order to make sure that it follows a Republican right-wing agenda. And within
let me hop in.
So I have a question.
Let me hop in. Yeah, let me hop in, and because first I think there's some fact land. So first I'm gonna do like more facts, and then I'm gonna do my commentary and my thoughts. So one, I just think that technically, I think education has always been a very political thing, and you are seeing it be more political as of late. And the same things that we're kind of, these aspersions that we're casting on this, right? Like I just want to be very clear. We get that same smoke or heat or get called those things as people that are okay and open to things like charter schools or people having school choice or people being able to have those things, right? I think that's one. I think two, what school boards have been for a long time, save except for the last 10 or 12 years, is they've been political stepping stones, right? It's been somewhat of a relatively easy arena that you can enter in, and then from there, make some quick changes. You may, whether you care about schools or not, wasn't really all that relevant, right? It's a good path to becoming mayor or to becoming like another type of joint, right? And then three, I would just say that there has been more money pumped into school board elections from all sides in the last 10 years. So part of this, I'll just have to speak for me and David. David and I were had some looking at an Oakland election, and then there was a very left-wing thing that where a lot of money got poured in and personal attacks came on us just because we said something about, school choice or whatnot. That was just kind of some fact land. Like, it's not just one side that got millionaires and billionaires pumping money in. Like, teachers unions is putting a lot of money into these things, as our own Omar, who ran for a board position, got to feel that onslaught firsthand. Now for my commentary. That had nothing to do with my feelings or my emotions. My commentary is, I'm not a far right wing person living in Texas, and I don't believe that those things should be happening per se, right? I actually believe in strong church versus state separation for reasons like this. I don't think that schools necessarily, I don't know if schools have the right or the power to be the moral compass when I know what education in this country is. And I remember seeing as a kid, that picture of that native kid in native garb at the beginning of the school year and then dressed like a white man at the end of the school year, right? So personally, I think that when we talk about policy, people have to remember that politics and policy cuts both ways. Either you want people to be able to have money and do PACs and do that, or you don't, right? Like, it has to be one or all, because what one side does, the other is going to counter and the other is going to do. Texas is going to Texas regardless, right? You can tell people that they can't pray, but people in Texas gonna pray when they want to pray, and they're gonna do those things. Now, I do think that these things are running rimshot. I think these things are going way beyond the pale. I think it's a lot of craziness that's happening, and there's gonna be equal reactions in other states. And as right now, it's like, and Texas just entered the conversation on this level, but Florida and California have been jousting back and forth, trying to outdo each other for like the soul of the nation around education. And my last point before we go to you, Jubilee, just very quickly, is public education, man. Like it is a powerful one that people want to invest in because it is the minds of children, and people have different values of what education should be. Public education has been for a long time the process by showing what America is, what America's values are, and like you have to be pro-American. When I grew up going to school in Kentucky, like we did the Pledge of Allegiance every single day. It's just one of those things, right? So people have different views and values on what the purpose of education is. So I'm not surprised by anything in Texas. I don't think this is new. Now, how will it impact the rest of the nation? I think it gives fodder, and people that are leaning that way will lean on that stuff and that precedence, and people that lean the other way will look to a New York and to a California. But Jube, I know you had some thoughts. I just wanted to get those in, just quickly and to keep it going.
Sure. This is pissing me off, getting annoyed over here. Just because I want them to stop. Oh no, do not bark right now, Meadow. I'm trying to get my thoughts out.
There she go, talking to that dog like it's a human again. Go ahead.
That she is your favorite person. She
It's
is.
not a person. It ain't a person, and Mufasa is dead. Continue.
Oh my God. You know what? We will continue to have conflict over this later. Anyhow.
Doc wins the player hater of the year.
Tell me why you're mad. Did you?
It's a fact. The dog is not a person. Go ahead. I'm sorry, Jubilee. Welcome back. We're so happy to have you back from Africa.
Indeed.
Please don't go back. Please don't leave us again. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
You know what? Okay, thank you so much. I'm so happy to be back. Just a few thoughts, right? And one is just like, how in the world do we shift this power dynamic? It is pissing me off. It is saying, it's giving for sale our children's minds, their souls, their futures are for sale. And as a nation, we're always going to go with what matters now over what matters most. And we will sell our children just for our own pride, arrogance, ego. That's what we're willing to do. I have not seen it any different over the past, for as long as I've been alive, right? And just to your earlier point when you said that education has always been this very political thing, and then the people who are in charge or in these power positions make laws that allow people to continue to do these things that empower the people that are doing these things. So it's a real question, right? Like how do we shift this power dynamic? Why is somebody able to just go into a school board meeting and say these things and make these kinds of suggestions or what have you, and make these changes and see it happen, right? Without a background, without being proven, without being someone who has shown and demonstrated that they have the hearts and minds of children at the core of their interests. Like I'm tired of that. Okay, and then I think I have one more question. Did I have one question? Oh, back again. What do we agree on as a nation? We don't need to. I don't think that we need. And I'm a Christian. I'm a believer. Okay, I tell you, I love Jesus Cristo, right? And so I understand that translates into my moral beliefs and all of that. But I still believe that there should be separation, right, between church and state, and kind of for some of the reasons that you shared, Charles. But like, can anybody explain to me, what do we agree on as a nation as it relates to education? Like, we had a whole pandemic, and mind you, a side note is I've been studying the NAEP, and it's like they ain't saying nothing new. They blamed it on the pandemic, but really the scores have been terrible for the past 30 years. It's not like it's the pandemic that worsened the scores, but that's a whole nother story. But like, what do we agree on as a nation that our children need. I just feel like our babies are always getting tossed to and fro because of, politics and the people in these power positions that are not making decisions in the best interest of children. And that's why I'm annoyed.
Yeah. I want to just quickly interject and throw a little bit of a lightning rod in here, either to play devil's advocate or as a Texan. Jubilee, like, you make a good point, but do we need to agree? As we grow
Yes.
as a country and as
Well, if we wait on agreement, it ain't gonna never happen.
I think we need to come to some.
Why not have
We need to agree on some core things. Come on. Some of these people are running corporations. You're running households. There are agreements. Like, please don't tell me that you have millions and billions of dollars or you're in some kind of power position and you don't know that there needs to at least be some level of consensus on what we freaking think.
But that's the Constitution, though. That's why the document. That's why church and state is supposed to be separated, right? Like, that is the agreement. The agreement is that like we're a democratic society, and there's supposed to be a separation of church and state, which makes what's happening in Texas super egregious. Like they're out of step with the one thing that is like a doctorate that's supposed to
but
be guiding stuff.
Is it that egregious? Because that's what a private school is. So if you privatize education with vouchers, doesn't that empower the parents? Doesn't that empower you, Jubilee, to be like, I'm not going to send my kid to this school, or I'm going to send my kid to the school that agrees with my values, including those of Jesus Christ, because that's what I believe in. So isn't Texas just empowering you all to make better choices that you have the power to make and therefore have the ability to make it instead of being controlled by the government and by the state?
I mean, they are doing controlling things. So I don't know, I don't buy that. What I'm saying is, regardless of religious belief, regardless of those stances, right? What do we believe an American kid should know between K and freaking 12th grade? Whether you're a Muslim, Christian, atheist, agnostic, gay, straight, black or white, boy, girl, binary, fluid, what do we think children should know? And can we make decisions from that standpoint? And I feel like the reason we are still frozen in time and digressing right after the pandemic is because even a pandemic couldn't whip us into shape and make us say, listen, we don't care about you trying to privatize schools or like, that's not what we need. We need to talk about the what, and the what is, what do we feel like our children need to know K through 12? All the other system responses come after that. We keep on talking about the how and not the freaking what. And it's annoying, okay? And I'm sleep deprived, so I'm extra today.
I think the thing that I'm thinking about now is so what you're talking about, and I agree with this. We have like a national curriculum, right? A national framework, and then you can add, 80% is like a national curriculum, and 20% can be localized depending on your state or your locality. The challenge there is that we live in a federal system, right? And so we don't really have education is just not something that is very robustly supported at the federal level. People even talking about wanting to get away with the federal Department of Education. And then we're really on our own. So you're gonna have different standards or ways of operating and running schools. What's accepted, what isn't, different in California than Florida, than Texas, and Illinois, than New York. And I think the what Omar brought forward in this school board case is, the more reliant we are on local solutions that have some form of quote unquote democratically elected system. You have the it's ripe for corruption, and not really like corruption as in money laundering, but corruption as in people gaming the system like they are in Texas to get on school boards, right? And the way that people are using and abusing the fundraising mechanisms to get elected, by taking large sums of dark money and using it to essentially buy seats. But going back to what Charles said too, this is we're going to go hard on both sides. This is what unions do too.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at California, the California Teachers Association.
Oakland just decided to strike today, but I mean the strike isn't happening. But go ahead, brother.
Well, I mean, so the in California, like, we don't have the Republican problem that you have in Texas. We have a Democratic problem, capital D. And I mean, they basically own Sacramento, right? So we have a state superintendent of public instruction that has been called in to mediate a strike in Oakland, which has been going on all week. Kids are locked out of school. And he's going to be at the table between the district and the union. Well, guess who funded and propelled his political career in the form of tens of millions of dollars to get there, right? So he gained that seat with union money. You think he's going to be objective in those closed door meetings? Hell no. It's the same thing. People, if you get elected, even if it's not directly to your campaign, that some other people put a lot of money into your election. You are no longer an independent politician. Somebody owns you. And in this case, we're talking about, ALEC, right? This national network that is run by a very wealthy family that are pulling the strings. And they're pulling the strings in Texas in a couple of ways. You've talked about it. In book banning, in banning any kind of curriculum around, like, things having to do with sex, which is a natural part of being a human being. People have sex, children have sex, young kids have sex. And I'm like, so let's not teach them about that, banning all the LGBTQ stuff. And then the real kicker here is, like, let's do that. And then at the same time, we're doing that at the local level in Dripping Springs, Texas. Sounds like a nice place, except for the politics. In Austin, like, let's go ahead and figure out how we can fast track public money into private schools. So let's destroy from within and let's destroy from without. Essentially, from the state house to the local school board house, totally abandoning public education. Now, that's a dereliction of duty, if you ask me.
Yeah, man. I mean, and you asked that question. I mean, what do we agree on? This is what I think we agree on, Jubilee, quite honestly. What does NAEP assess, and what does PISA assess? So for those that are listening, NAEP is basically the national assessment of students, right? Reading, writing, whatever, how well you do. And PISA is what it looks like internationally. So when you see rankings of how countries are performing or things like that, and there are things that they look at, right? They tend to look at math scores tends to be like a big one. We care about math. We care about those things. But here's the interesting thing based off of what I just heard David say and how Omar built the premise, right? In an issue like this, you will see the most extreme white racist like group. I couldn't say right wing for whatever reason, but you will see the most extreme right wing group agree with like probably one of the most pro-nationalists, whether it's black or brown or whatever group. You'll see them agree because nobody trusts the country for what you just said, Jubilee. Like, nobody trusts the country to just teach their kids. Malcolm X says only a fool allows his enemy to educate his children. Like, when I grew up, I learned about the greatness of this country and how benevolent we were, right? Like, there's a lot of things. There's a story. Public education is the biggest commercial for the nationalism of this country. And guess what? A lot of countries, their education is set up in a nationalist format, right? Like no country is going to use their public dollars to make themselves lose power for the structure that they're trying to, create, right? So, you know what I'm saying? And like the same way we got our thoughts about a Russia or a China, like you hear reports when people come out of like, there's a sister from North Korea that escaped all this stuff and now she's here, right? And she's talking about how she learned about America, right? Like she heard about America in a very, very different way than like I was taught about America. So what this makes me think is this makes me more of a proponent to be able to choose where my kid goes to school. This makes me more of a proponent to be able to put my kid in an environment that's going to not just teach them the history of this country and how to read and how to do math, but that's also going to like make sure that he or she feels like they are important or that they had a history before slavery or things like that. And guess what? there's places inside this country that don't want to hear that. They don't want to revisit those things. It scares them and is worrisome to them. So that was why my reaction was what it was, Jubilee, when you said, what can we agree on in this country? I don't think we can agree on a lot, except for like what I teach in my home, in my church, in my private school. See, like that's the thing, right? The rub is in my private school, and that brings it back to what you were talking about, Omar. Is privatization a goal for a lot of people in this country? And I would say absolutely it is, because a lot of people are not trusting a system. And let me just be very real. Like, while I might be sounding like I'm caping for democracy, and on some level I am, right? I'm an American, right? Like there's a democratic process here, man. I didn't have good education from K-12 either. The K-12 that I saw where my people came up in, like those kids that I grew up with, man, a lot of them are not doing well today. This is what we don't learn in this country. We don't learn how to manage money. We don't learn about taxes. We don't learn about how this country was built in order to this country was built for business. Like, if you are in business, you can, like, everybody's so shocked about Donald Trump and his taxes, right? It's like, because a lot of us didn't grow up learning financial codes and all that stuff, right? So I think it's an interesting topic, man. I'm glad that you brought it up, Omar. I think this is the topic we're going to probably stay on for the rest of the show, because it's 46. But I like this topic. I mean, we're all talking, and like we all are like, and I like when Jubilee is she gets fired up.
And let me go ahead and interject this if we're going to kind of continue talking about this, because one of the things I wanted to talk about was, did anything change educationally after the pandemic? These folks in Texas are saying didn't. All these parents are upright about, hey, we had this pandemic. It was a great time to shift things, to really rethink how we were doing education. And we came back and they're saying it's business as usual. Nothing changed. This is exactly why we should begin the movement for vouchers, greater privatization. And from what I just heard, Charles was supporting it. Charles is like,
I'm not supporting their politics, but I'm supporting the right to be able, like, yo, if I can put my kids in a better situation where they're not going through what we going through in Oakland every other year. Yeah, I'm absolutely gonna do what I want to do with my kids.
I want to ask this to you all. Like, what are your feelings about that? Because Charles clearly is a big proponent of, like, let's go vouchers. Let's just get rid of.
I did not say that. I did not say that at all.
I heard. That's what I heard.
I said choice. Choice has a bunch of different
I'm with Charles on that.
I didn't say vouchers at all. You said vouchers.
Mean other than privatization, other than
no, because in California, because in Oakland, we didn't have vouchers at all. The choice was a conversation with no type of vouchers in sight. I mean, but I'm not a big proponent. So don't put that in my. I didn't say that, bro. That is not what I said.
Well, I'm just trying to be clear about what you said. Because to me, it sounded like privatization. What's choice mean without privatization?
I mean, there's a whole choice movement in Oakland where there was no voucher system in sight, and like a lot of people can't afford private schools. What I'm talking about is when my mother was threatened with jail time if she got caught using an illegal address to put me in Berkeley High School as opposed to the traditional high school that was in my neighborhood. That's what I'm talking about, being able to choose without being criminalized, and because this school ain't probably necessarily working for me. But I mean, if vouchers is a thing, I don't know. I've never been presented with that. But if somebody was to offer me something, listen, man, the way you used to get out when you was as a kid, like you get really, really good in basketball, and some Saint school with Saint in front of it they give you a scholarship to go play ball at their private school, right? Like most of the kids I knew in the hood, if they got that opportunity, their parents took it. They took it every time. So I mean but I don't know. Like I said, you vouchers is a thing in tech. Like you were in Texas where things are happening at a different type of pace, but I don't have experience with vouchers like that.
Me neither.
Well, this is what I'm asking, because if there's a different level of choice that parents can have within the public school system, that's one conversation. But what these right wingers are saying is that we should just have unabashed choice. Let's voucher the whole thing up. You can choose a private school, a charter school, a public school. Everyone, like, the money's going to follow the kid wherever they decide to go. and
Mm-hmm.
you can have your choice. And like, you can not only have your choice of a charter school, but if you want Jesus Cristo involved in your education on a daily basis, and this is really what Texas is saying and pushing into the national agenda is, shouldn't every parent have that choice?
So I mean, I think we talked about this a couple of weeks ago. So I'm going to open a Nation of Islam private school in Texas, and I'm going to wait for that public money to come rolling in, right, on that voucher money. Are they going to be okay with that, right? You know, a big old Nation of Islam private school, right? Flags up everywhere. It's a school choice, right? I think the I mean, for me, like I call it scorched earth school choice. Doesn't work. Like when you just like tear down the guardrails, let the money flow, money follows the child. I mean, we still have, I mean, we can agree that there's a lot of work that needs to happen in and around accountability for our public school system. We can agree that we can retool and rethink what accountability looks like for charter schools, but we can't agree or even have a conversation about what it looks like in the private school sector, because there's very little accountability other than people showing up and the schools getting funded, you know, by those families or by voucher money or scholarship money. The other problem I have with it is that, and there are some like success stories, some anecdotes here and there, scholarship programs, you know, education savings accounts that are able to, you know, help low-income children, Black and brown children, transition into the private school space. But, you know, in mass, when you look at the totality of the data, when you open the floodgates, right, and let anybody go wherever they want, you run into all kinds of challenges around information, around knowledge, around what choice actually means, around transportation, around special education services, around any kind of like tutoring or remediation services, that private schools don't have to do any of that stuff, right? For the most part. And so at the end of the day, the children that we talk about on this show are more likely to be hurt by scorched earth school choice than not.
I'm going to bring up two things because I love what you just said, because now I'm going to flip to the other side of this devil's advocacy. Is that the article brought something up that I thought was an extraordinarily important and poignant point. 91% of the kids in Texas are in public schools. So if you're talking about vouchers and privatization to start going to private schools and all this stuff, which ones? There's no infrastructure for it. And it's not all of a sudden that these things are going to start getting built up overnight just to get property, financing, all those things. Take it from me, who started charter schools. It is an inordinately difficult endeavor just to start a school. And then the evidence of programs that have tried to do this have found that 4 out of 10 of those types of schools shut down. And then ultimately, I had a big worry personally in that when people start talking about vouchers and everything else, my biggest problem with the voucher system is that those private schools that kids want to get into that are good schools are only going to increase their price to price them out. So my niece goes to a private school, for example. Let's just say, for example, it costs $5,000. I don't know the price, $5,000 a year to go to. And it's like, here's this voucher for, you know, $10,000 a year. That school will up their tuition to $20,000 a year, $30,000 a year. Because it's like, here's a voucher money. We'll take that. And then we'll take your money to ensure that the kids who we've been talking about, those low income kids that desperately need these options, will get priced out. And that brings up David's point. My second biggest worry is that, like, not only will the low income kids get priced out, in my opinion, but then what accountability? It goes to Jubilee's point of, can we agree on the fundamentals of what should be happening? And the right to an education means that regardless of disability, race, nationality, gender, sex, anything, you're entitled to not only a good education, but one in which that incorporates the needs of what that child needs in terms of is a child emerging bilingual? Do they have dyslexia? And those private schools don't have any accountability to those things whatsoever and can kick a kid out no matter what. And they will kick those kids out because they are much more difficult to educate, need more money, need more resources to make their scores look good, to make their school look good. And then where's choice now? Where is choice now? Where's the accountability?
I don't disagree with nothing that you're saying, but you're also making the argument against you. You're also making an argument against the type of school that you run and the type of, like, people can say the same thing about charter schools, right? Like, and they have.
I don't think they can. I don't think
they absolutely have. They absolutely have. Every
It's
argument, every single I've heard,
not the same.
I've heard education policy.
They can make the arguments.
They make the. Not only can they make the argument, they do make the argument.
They do, but they ain't right. They're false.
They're not
educated.
This ain't about. But here's the thing. But here's the thing about policy. Policy cuts both ways. So I'm fine with that. I'll stand on that with you. But you're going to get attacked and they're going to say the exact same thing. They're going to say, well, charter schools close more than traditional public schools. You know why? It's because they come up for every 5 years for review and they can be closed down even if they're doing well because of political issues. That is the same argument. Only reason I like I said, I don't agree with what you're saying, Omar. I actually agree with you a lot. But I've watched schools get closed down using the exact same arguments that you made. Like, I've seen it happen in Oakland. Like, there are schools right now that are performing better than traditional schools, and they have to go up for review against a board, again, that you just said was paid for by teachers union money, that they have a very favorable board for, and I do not think those schools are going to get renewed. And now what's going to happen is those schools are going to get closed down, and then that same argument. Well, see, this is why we shouldn't have charter schools, because they just close down, and then these kids are left in a lurch. It's a lot of stuff that's not being said in that piece. So I don't disagree with what you're saying. I am just warning about policy that it has to cut both ways. The last example I'll give: I'm a Democrat. People were saying that we don't have the numbers on the Supreme Court, so extend the Supreme Court. Charles, what do you think about that? I'm like, no. Well, why? You're a Democrat. Because if you do it right now for Democrats, and then something shifts, and then now Democrats have the most judges, and then the Republican people are in power, then they're going to just expand. And then you got 31 Supreme Court justices at some point, right? Like, I'm just saying, this is the lessons of policy. You have to try to game for unintended consequences. Brown versus Board did not game for unintended consequences. And what Brown versus Board did, we like to tell his happy ass story about desegregation, but what it did is it eviscerated a black teacher core that we have not been able to recover from since. So, and now our kids go to shitty schools and they have to be bound by that. And only time white people talk to them is to keep those people in those shitty schools so they don't have those choices and those options. So I'm good with it. Just know it cuts both ways. Unintended consequences.
1980s. Yo, just to not to be the Nancy timekeeper here, but
I know we're at time. This is your topic.
Yeah,
this your day.
Not to be the Nancy who? What?
Nancy timekeeper. Jimmy timekeeper.
Nancy, okay,
yeah.
Gotcha.
Look, you running the show today. Look, Omar's running the show today. This is your time. This is all you, buddy. Go ahead, man.
We got to wrap this up. So we got to get into final thoughts. Jubilee, you got final thoughts? Ladies first.
They just getting on my nerves. It's my final thought. You know me. I got more questions, and I just feel like this is the reality TV show called Hijacked. Like the American education system is always freaking hijacked by the latest initiative, whether it's privatization, whether it's the charter school movement, which is a whole damn podcast episode by itself for that, right? And it's just like, what would it take for us to center and get to? I really believe that there are things we can agree on that we feel like as a nation, if we value all the stakeholders and bring them to the table, we can come to a consensus, right? It will take time, but we can come to a consensus around what we feel like our children, the children of this nation, would need to know before we even touch religion. And I am not trying to turn, a public school classroom into my dining room table. I'm just not, right? Like, I'm not relinquishing my right as a parent. And I know everybody has a different flow, different belief, different way of parenting. I get it. But as a parent who's also an educator, who's also a leader, I'm not relinquishing my parental rights to a school, be it private, public, charter, I don't care, right? Like, so those values and religious beliefs I teach at home. But when my kid goes to a school, be it public, private, charter, or what have you, there are certain things that I want to ensure that they learn, And so I think that we end up removing ourselves from the main thing. And I think that we have an issue as a nation is we just do not keep the main thing as the main thing. And we are always focusing on what matters now versus what matters most.
Well
The
said.
main thing. All right, the main thing. I'm going to go on this thread because I'm thinking the same. I believe. I mean, outside of this outside of the specifics of our conversation in Texas, I believe that our school systems have to get back down to the brass tacks of the basics, and it is the main thing. So a refocusing on some very core, basic fundamentals of education, literacy, mathematics, the scientific process, historical analysis, right? And we've lost our way there. And so what we have now is, this intrusion of the far right and, lots of money coming in to shift public education outside of its core mission, which we call mission creep, to ban books, to ban what teachers can teach, to ban what subjects teachers can teach, and to ban any kind of curriculum that is affirming to students that may be LGBTQ or trans, right? Also, same goes for the left. We need to get away from schools and school systems that are teaching a particular ideology that is also too far left, right? That promotes like a culture of victimization, right? Because you're black or brown. And I think, both of those things are true. So I think getting more centered on the main thing, for sure. I think schools, both sides are maybe trying to do too much. I think school systems that have, a more, centralized kind of curriculum are doing better, and they're not killing themselves over it and trying to stay out of the political wars. That's number one. I think number two may have eluded me. So yeah, I'm going to pass it along to the next person. Great show, Omar. Thank you.
Yeah, good job, Omar. I'll go so Omar can take us out.
Thank you, Omar.
I think I'll just say, every day public education becomes less about education and it's just more of a proxy war. And that's what we're discussing. We're not talking like I fully wholeheartedly agree with what David is saying. I think we should be focusing on reading, writing, arithmetic, real history, things like that. If it's my kid or if it's people that I love, though, I'm going to teach that real history. I'm going to teach them where they come from. I'm going to teach them about money and I'm going to teach them about power, because all this is about power. And a lot of these conversations devolve because we don't want to say the thing that's actually happening. And what is the proxy war being fought for, right? There's a lot of things happening in this country, and sadly, our kids are not being trained to discern between what's real news and what's not, what's propaganda and what's fact. And so, I appreciate these kind of conversations because they're ideological at heart, and it's like, what do you believe and why do you believe it? But we got a lot of data to look at. We have a lot of information of how people have been getting educated in this country, and I do wish we. I hope we can talk about the pandemic stuff, but we are starting to have conversations about the pandemic as if education was good before it. It has not been good for a long time. And so, as Howard Fuller would say, and David reiterates on this show a lot, man, if it wasn't built by God, it can change, man. It's a reason why the education system still looks the same, man, why classrooms still look the same from over 100 years when nothing else around you does. Grass don't even grow the same, but our schools, but our classrooms are set up the same way. Yeah. And sometimes things are antiquated, and sometimes you have to ask yourself why and who that's serving. But again, great show, O, and you take us out.
So I want to touch on something Doc just said and plug the South Star Classroom. We're writing a book, ladies and gentlemen. God willing, this will be coming.
Don't put a day on it, Omar. Please don't.
You know, but we're writing it, and what Doc was saying is spot on in that as an educator in our educator hats, we want to make sure that education teaches the core values of teaching students how to be not just successful in society, but lead society. And in that respect, the South Star Classroom is coming at you not only with our consultancy work, but a book really talking about the fundamental changes we believe need to start happening in public education that are going to address the needs of parents and students and future citizens after the pandemic. Doc is right. Things have not changed, and I'm a huge advocate of shifting this status quo of what's been happening in education to make it significantly more potent, impactful, and empowering for the student. Not for a political group, not for a union, not for a Democrat or Republican, but for that student so that they can have incredible success. So be on the lookout for that. We're going to get that to you. I couldn't be more excited. Now, to put on my political hat, I think that Jubilee, David, and Doc did a great job of saying, as educators, this is what should be happening in education. As I put on my political science hat and my political hat, I can't think of the history, particularly of the GOP and the Republican Party, of figuring out ways to stay both relevant and in power. Doc talks about it all the time. Those in power want to stay in power. And if they are getting that challenge, they're going to figure out any means necessary to ensure that they stay in power. With the fall of Jim Crow in the South, famously, Ronald Reagan, a fantastic racist in every way, shape, or form, him and Andrew Card basically were like, we're just going to get rid of the word segregation and Jim Crow and interject states' rights. It's a whole new day in America. We can't use Jim Crow anymore. We can't use segregation anymore. This is the 1980s. So we're going to shift our vocabulary and our strategy around states' rights. Insert Tom DeLay, also from the state of Texas. Hey, we're going to lose elections. So what are we going to do about it? We're going to create what's called essentially gerrymandering, which is a political strategy of redrawing lines so that Republicans and the GOP will continue to win because we're not going to win. These last several elections have proved beyond a shadow of a doubt that the soul of America is really one that is leaning significantly more on what is a traditional liberal side. Most Americans are for abortion. Most Americans are for equal rights for gays, trans, and whomever it may be. And the core tenets of conservatism in the Republican Party, aside from the economics, more on the social side, they're losing out because America is leaning towards a radically different and more progressive way. So what is the GOP and the Republican Party saying now? Hey, let's indoctrinate. Let's start focusing on state legislatures and school boards and start figuring out a way of not educating our children, but indoctrinating them into these ideologies so they stay on our side, because there's no way we're going to win an election if we don't get into the local school districts, start indoctrinating children and start indoctrinating them to this American ideology, this far right-wing ideology, and an ideology based on fear. And that, ladies and gentlemen, from my perspective, I will not tolerate. I will fight against it. I will fight always for choice and the betterment of a child. But any shape, form of indoctrination in the public school system will always fight against, because it has no place. As Jubilee said, it belongs in the dining room table and not in our school system. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the South Star Classroom. Don't forget, we will be coming to you live on Tuesday, ladies and gentlemen, this Tuesday, 3 p.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. Eastern. We will have a rebroadcast of that show Friday, 3 p.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. Eastern. On behalf of everyone here at the South Star Classroom, that's Jubilee, that's David Castillo, that's the real Dr. Charles Cole. I'm Omar Yanad. Have a wonderful weekend. We love you all, and we'll see you all next Tuesday.